Relationships aren't always sunshine and rainbows. Just like in nature, you can't have rainbows without a little rain.
Journey with us,
Shani Goodson
and Dr. Sundiata as we share stories and insights about our thriving, unconventional love life and our unique take on relationships and consensual non-monogamy. What's happening, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Sunshine and Rainbows.
Hey, y'all.
I'm so excited.
Again, every time.
Yes.
We're back here. I'm excited to be back.
So excited to be with you all once again. So how you feeling today?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. And guess what, y'all? I'm not tired yet. Typically, I'm always like, I'm a little tired, but I'm okay. Today, I'm feeling pretty good.
He said I'm not tired yet.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good.
Good. Feeling good enough to talk about the complexity of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. This is a tough topic. It's even hard to talk about, really, when I think about it. But I hope that we do a good enough job to give you all some perspective on how we navigate this topic, and maybe you all can share some stuff with us in the chat, in the comments, about how you navigate it for those of you who are non-monogamous and polyamorous. So what's that topic going to be for the day?
That's what I was about to ask you. What are we talking about? It's so hard to talk about.
We're talking about being a Hinge, or navigating Hinge complexity, everything Hinge when it comes to, consensual non-monogamy and polyamory.
I feel like this is a place where Sundiata sometimes he feels non-monogamy especially hard, So
Definitely.
What is a Hinge? A Hinge is a shared partner. So it's basically the person who connects two people who aren't really in a relationship with each other to one person. So there's like a V, right? A V is there's one person down here, that's the Hinge, and they're in a relationship with that person and a relationship with that person, but these two people aren't really in a relationship.
Yeah.
So the Hinge is basically the connector between those two people, which is probably why we call it a Hinge. Hinge is what joins, two things or two people. So I think it's especially hard to talk about because being a Hinge doesn't have like clear roles or expectations like other things in our society, because it's just not something that we experience. We're so conditioned to be monogamous that experiences as a Hinge are not, there's no expectations, there's no we don't know. You don't know you don't know what to do. You don't know what's right to do.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard. You have to navigate each relationship very separately, very differently, because different relationships are going to require different things of the Hinge.
Indeed. There's this saying in the polyamory circles and online groups, that there's never really meta problems. There's only Hinge problems. And what they're getting at when people say that is, there's often times people jumping into the various Facebook groups and complaining about an issue with the meta, right? And again,
and a metamor is?
A metamor is my partner's partner, my love's love, someone that I am not in a relationship with, but she is, for example. That person would be my metamor, or meta for short. And oftentimes, one of the most common challenges in polyamory is metas clashing, metas having issues. And one of the first things that people will say or comment when folks bring their meta issues to a group is, well, what is the Hinge doing? Or what could the Hinge be doing differently to mitigate or, eliminate such problems or issues?
I do talk about this in an article that I wrote too, by the way. I bring up that exact saying because it's so commonly said, especially by experienced polyamorous people. Like people who have been polyamorous for a long time almost always agree with that there's no such thing as meta problems, only Hinge problems. So I actually quoted that in the article, which is called Metamor Relationships and Polyamory. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Or Navigating Metamor. I will link it because it's pretty relevant to what we're talking about today. I even have like a whole section in that article called The Hinge because it's just such a complicated and complex thing
Yeah.
to be. So what do you think about that? Like, do you think that it's true? In your experiences as a Hinge and with your partner, do you believe that saying that there's no such thing as meta problems?
No, I don't. I don't. There's times that I have in my journey where I'm like, you know what, that makes so much sense based on some things I may have experienced in a given scenario. So I'll say that oversimplifies it, because it's something that's so nuanced and complex, like most things when it comes to relationships, especially relationships the way that we do relationships. So I absolutely believe there's a large percentage of meta issues that are really an issue of how the Hinge is navigating that dynamic. However, I think that there's some unintended consequences or unintended tensions that might arise even when people have the best intentions in mind of, let's say, wanting to meet their potential meta if a love of theirs, starts dating someone new and they want to meet them. They're excited to meet them. And then, sometimes folks start feeling things that they didn't know that they were going to experience. Or they may notice that there's some, misalignments. They don't like the way they just don't like things about that person when they do meet them. And then all of a sudden, maybe that energy comes off to the other person. And now here we are with some issues and tensions that can just kind of, emerge out of that. So I think it's way more complex than that.
Okay.
So I guess I know it's hard to talk about, but let's try to talk about like what we believe the role of a Hinge is.
I mean, I've already kind of touched on that I think it's ever changing, and that's why you don't. It's ever changing, and it's definitely one of the places where gender differences show up a lot. It's, to me, Hinge and meta relationships is a place where we see a lot of differences between the way women show up and the way men show up. So, role of a Hinge, I feel like the Hinge needs to just focus on their relationships.
Yeah.
As much as possible, focus on your relationships, and that's the Hinge's role.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that the Hinge you can't depend on the Hinge to connect these people because they need to have a relationship, right? There needs to be a line between them as well, right? If this is a triangle, if that's what we have, that relationship needs to be separate.
Yeah.
So I think the Hinge needs to see it as such.
Yeah. But the thing is, sometimes there's not even a path towards a relationship between metas. Like, for example, it really just depends on so many variables. Like, do you and your love or your partner both desire kitchen table poly dynamics? And if they do, meaning kitchen table poly, meaning that, they want to be able to have a dynamic where they both can literally sit down, or all three people can sit down at the kitchen and break bread and talk, or sit on the couch and spend time together, basically. There's some people that want that. And so in that scenario, like if say Shani started dating someone new, I would say, I want to meet them. However, if I chose to say I want parallel polyamory dynamics, then I would say I don't want to meet them. And if that's the case, her role would be different than if I said I wanted kitchen table polyamory, or I agreed to that and we both agreed to that. And then there's something called garden party, which is, I may meet this person at social events. In Atlanta, we have several social events, all the time around, for different polyamory groups. So, if Shani is dating someone new, it's a good chance that person is going to be at one of these events, and vice versa. So some people are comfortable just being in a social setting with their metas versus, any type of like close knit setting. And in each of those different scenarios, the role of the Hinge is going to be different.
I think the role of the Hinge I think experiences the Hinge will have will be different. But could you like, what do you think the role of a Hinge is if they are kitchen table or if they are parallel? Like, how do you think it changes?
Well, again, it's going to, in my experience, it's going to depend on the needs of the people in those relationships. And that's where it's going to be such a, you know, it's just going to be different. So, as a standalone, generic, based on my experience answer to that, I would say similar to you. I would say just be who you are in each individual relationship. And then any feedback that comes your way, then be prepared for some dialogue around, navigating that feedback, if there's any tension with that feedback. And when I get into, we're going to talk about some of our experiences, and I can kind of give some examples of why I'm saying it that way. But I think that's really the most important thing. Like you said, don't have any expectations of the two metamors like liking each other, being aligned, being able to be friends in any dynamic or any way, being able to be romantic in any way, if that's a desire between all the folks. Don't have any expectations around those things. Just show up for the people you're in a relationship with in the ways that, feel natural. And then also be ready to navigate some uncomfortable feelings that may emerge even in that dynamic where people say we want to be kitchen table, but then when they get into a kitchen table scenario, start feeling all types of uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should definitely get into experiences.
Okay. So, the reason I say that is because, I've had situations where, folks come in. I know, for myself, I came in feeling like kitchen table poly was the thing I want because I like the idea of community, village, etc. And, in my mind, more love, the better. The more support, the more relationships, the more resources, everyone getting along. It just felt good and it made sense to me. And I've often dated and related with other with women who felt the same way. And because most of us have come into this obviously from monogamous relationships, that concept sounds and feels good until you do it. And I've been in situations where everyone's on board with saying let's do kitchen table, and then when we get into kitchen table dynamics and close proximity with all these different people, and you see how the affection is seeing affection happen between your love and the other person, seeing how much maybe touchy feely and or how much time is being spent, how much conversation. I've noticed that sometimes people start like bean counting and saying, well, I saw you touch her or him more, or you spent a little bit more time talking to him or her, etc. And whether I'm the one experiencing it, I've been there where I felt some discomfort when I noticed like a new person coming into the space. I've also been on the other side where my meta was complaining to our love in common about how much time she was giving me versus him, and me feeling uncomfortable about that, and that making the whole environment uncomfortable. So, yeah, that's what I'll say. Hope you're enjoying this episode. Let's take a quick break to tell you about something that we've been working on.
We're excited to announce our course and coaching program, Relationship Bliss, where we help polyamorous people transform their relationships into highly compatible, peaceful, deeply aligned, and blissful partnerships.
We do this by sharing techniques for effective communication, deeper connection, and conflict resolution. The program offers a self paced course with 5 learning modules, 25 training videos, and live virtual coaching sessions with us, Shani and Sundiata.
Learn more at go-growdialogue.com.
Thanks for listening. Now back to the show. Okay, so like in that's your experiences um, as a hinge, no, kind of like with the hinge, right? Yeah. I gave the example of both. I'll give another example of like me as a hinge in a very I guess I'm wondering like how it relates to roles too. Like, how are you, how do you feel, what have you felt your role to be when you have been in a hinge position like yourself? Or, and has it changed? That. Yeah. again, I think like you said, I don't even think I can put it in the box of a role. Honestly, I'm just trying to survive the situation when it happens, and just doing the best I can. So, but I don't, as we're talking about it, honestly, I don't think that it should be even viewed as a role. That's kind of how I'm feeling right now as we're talking about it, because I just think people have to show up and be themselves and do the best they can, and prepare to continue to be in dialogue with their loves about navigating any discomfort that anyone's experiencing.
What was the other example you were going to give?
So I'm thinking about this one time when I had my first date with two of my loves. And I was the hinge, and they didn't have a relationship at all. They knew each other, but they didn't have like a friendship or anything like that. And we went to a show, and in my mind, I was like, leading into it, I was excited to be able to have that experience, to be able to, go out and be with two of my loves, at the same time, and having them get a chance to like spend some time together. And what I realized once I got into that, that space, there was like little things that start showing up that I had not even thought about. Like for example, walking down the street, feeling uncomfortable because I'm walking next to one person and there may not be enough space for the three of us to walk next to each other. So I'm feeling uncomfortable, like, oh, and I got to navigate walking down the street and making sure that one person doesn't feel left out. And, or holding hands with one person. Well, if I'm holding hands with one person, I got to make sure I bring the other person along to hold hands with them. And like in real time, I'm thinking, okay, the best scenario would be for me not to walk next to either of them, let them walk next to each other and me walk behind them. But having to make those decisions in real time and navigate those things in real time as it was happening, I was like in a heightened state of awareness, almost to a point of being uncomfortable, having to navigate that. And I remember, once we got to our seats and, I sat in the middle and one person put their hand like on my leg, and then I'm worried like, okay. And then I return and put my hand on theirs, and then I'm like, well, do I have to put it on the other person's leg too? Or would it feel like performative because I'm only doing it to make it seem, just to be equal? Is that what they want, or will they not want that? I'm thinking about all these things, and I'm like, I remember saying to them, like, hey, y'all, can we talk about some of this in real time? Because I'm struggling with knowing what to do. Yo, I was a whole wreck. I was a whole wreck. And it ended up being, uncomfortable for me. So that's what I'll say.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because I feel like you have, you want that experience, but you didn't enjoy it.
In that moment, I was very, very new. Well, I won't say very, very new, but I was a couple years in, but that was my first time experiencing that, and especially in public. And that brought about other feelings too. Like another thing that came up was just feeling like people are looking at us. Like I had to navigate that because I felt uncomfortable. When I was walking with both at some point, holding both their hands, like, and feeling like I'm in a fishbowl, and people are like, "Oh, look at them! That's a polyamorous couple, or that's whatever they had in their mind of what we were doing." And that's not the social norm. So I noticed that we were moving through the world beyond social norms, and that would bring a spotlight to us, and that made me feel uncomfortable as well.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that I I do think that sometimes when people think they have a role as a hinge, that's when it leads to problems. Like when someone thinks that they do have something, like a specific responsibility as a hinge, like to be the introducer or the mediator or the go between, like if they start to give that type of energy, I do think that these types of relationships can go left, because it gets very complicated, So Sundiata mentioned things like how much affection is being shared between people, or just feelings that you didn't, a lot of mononormative conditioning that you don't realize might be there, can come up. And I think when the hinge is working hard to mediate that or mitigate that, sometimes it doesn't land the way they want. And I actually talked about that in my article as well, about Hinges not being great mediators and what kinds of issues can arise from Hinge problems. I think I don't have a ton of experiences as a Hinge because I don't I don't think I have like a lot to say about that, because I think as a woman, because I primarily date men, they typically stay parallel for the most part, or garden party. But I've not ever had a genuine kitchen table situation between my loves. Yeah, no, there was one that seemed like it might be, but it wasn't genuine. So I find that I would like more kitchen table experiences in that way, but I'm not gonna force it. I'm just not. The most I'll do is arrange a meeting, and that's it. I'll arrange a meeting, and I do that because, and by arrange a meeting, I mean arrange a time for Sundiata to meet whoever I'm dating. Because, and do I do that when I date women too? Yeah, actually, I do. And that's just because I want him to know them, so that when we have an event, or if we go to an event and we see them, he knows them, you know? And like if we go to a whole social event and I'm like, oh, hey, there goes my love, he's not like, oh, this is the first time we're meeting. So the most I'll do is that. But outside of that, I'm not doing anything else. The relationship will have to develop organically and authentically. Otherwise, there's no hope. There's no hope of it lasting, in my opinion.
So I have a question, like, you know, even in the like introduction or arranging a meeting, like what you'll do is oftentimes you'll just invite someone over for dinner. And so what was your experience in the last time when you invited, a man to the house for dinner and the three of us were here? Like, how was that experience for you?
I mean, it was okay. It was like having somebody over for dinner. There was no, I didn't feel like it was much different from having anybody over for dinner for me. I think for you, it's a little different. But for me, it wasn't I was just like, hey, chatting, trying to kind of facilitate communication. Like I'd be like, hey, did you guys know you have this in common? Or, hey, just that kind of conversation. But that's it.
So there was nothing around like navigating different forms of affection or like sitting on the couch and, like anything around that came up for you, and it just kind of was going with the flow.
Yeah, no, none of that really was, no. I didn't, and I also don't feel like much affection is shown in those situations. Like you and I are more affectionate one-on-one than we are in the presence of anybody else. So I didn't think it was very different. I think maybe like you might have noticed. That's why I think that experience would be different, for you.
Yeah.
So I think that would be like an experience for you as a meta, But for me as a Hinge, no, it was just like having somebody over for dinner. I will say, like, I kind of hope that there will be some level of friendship, so that people can come over whenever, and it can be very communal, and everybody can be comfortable. So that's all I really desire. Yeah. I do, if something organically more or like came about, that would be great. But that's not like, I don't think I'm ever really expecting or hoping for that in any way.
Yeah.
And then my experiences with Hinge, I've had a few, and I think that some people are more easygoing as Hinges than other people. Like some people are just like, kind of like me, where they're just like, hey, yeah, mingle amongst yourselves. And some Hinges are more like, hey guys, be friends, like, I want y'all to be friends, and they try to do things to make that happen, and that doesn't usually go as well. So I think that almost everybody who's ever tried that, if they stay in polyamory, they move away from that, and they just say no. Everybody needs to develop their own relationship organically and authentically, and they don't ever want to force kitchen table anymore. My experiences with Sundiata as a Hinge, like specifically, I would say early on, I did feel like he wanted like more interaction between my meta and me. And then I think eventually he started to be like, all right, like, let me back out of this. Let me get a little bit more hands off in this relationship. And I think that has helped. I think ever since he's kind of like, taken a step back and really separated the relationships, I think a little bit, I'm speaking from my own experience. You can tell me, correct me anywhere.
Yeah.
But I feel like since he's kind of separated the relationships the way I was talking about earlier, all of the interactions have been better.
Yeah. Yeah. And my goal in terms of the ways that I show up with metas is just cordiality. At a baseline, you're going to get cordiality from me. If, and I am communal, and I want, my loves or partners to feel comfortable around me, that they're going to get cordiality. Because I want people to feel like they can come and go, whether, any type of dynamic, whether it's out of our shared household, or, if I'm out and about with another love and one of her loves shows up, I want it to always feel like comfortable, communal. We can support each other. We can support each other in supporting our shared love or our love in common, etc. And I've always shown up that way, whether it comes to like planning for events, parties, showing up for, loves in common, and, or collaborating with a meta to, help, events and parties for a love in common, etc. I've always showed up cordial in those situations and willing to collaborate with a meta to, do those type of things. But cordiality is the baseline. I feel like that's enough. I don't think we should have to force like friendship or try to make it more than what naturally emerges. If friendship naturally emerges because of alignments, then I'm here for that. So that's kind of always been my approach. And in terms of like my experiences with the Hinge, it's been just depending on who the love is, it's been different. I've had some challenging experience with my love as a Hinge. I've had situations where the Hinge, like one situation that comes to mind, is a Hinge that would like feel really comfortable coming to me with some of the challenges that she was experiencing with my meta. And then I learned vice versa. She would feel comfortable going to my meta with certain challenges or issues that she may have with me. But conversely, she didn't feel as comfortable talking to either of us about the things that were going well or the things that she loved about both of us. And it was all for whatever reason, because of whatever she internalized in terms of the discomforts that, her loves may feel. It was like she didn't want to trigger any like twinge or, jealousy by saying, oh, I'm sharing any lovey-dovey feelings about the reasons why she, loves either of us. So it's like we were always getting like the challenging parts of who, each other were in a relationship with this Hinge. And what that did, I was conscious of it, but what it can do is put, someone in the mindset of like kind of looking at the other person with a side eye. Like, man, you over here always causing problems and, making her life harder, and what's wrong with you? And, and just having some skepticism and et cetera. And it can do that. One of the things that I started doing in that situation is I would consciously say, every time you share something like that, can you please also share something that's going well? Because I don't want to start developing some type of bias towards the other person in that way. And I would always, and even when she didn't, I would tell myself, well, she's still there. So there's a lot of things she must love about this person. There's a lot of things that does go well. A lot of things that, she does value about that relationship. And I would have to say that to myself because I have a subconscious, and my subconscious, at times, isn't in alignment with my conscious mind, or like my higher self. My lower self just wants to kind of lean into those competitive energies and things like that. And I'm always trying to unlearn those things, or keep them in their proper balance. So that's kind of how I've worked through that. But that is like some experience that I've had that was, that I didn't like with a Hinge.
I think that's a common one too. I think so many people do that, and they're scared, not scared, but they have anxiety around sharing the things, gushing about somebody who they really like, to somebody who they love, I can understand why that would be hard to do. But at the same time, just like you said, it can really influence the relationships between the metas, because it's really hard to separate the person from what you're hearing about them, especially because this person who's telling you things, you trust them. This is somebody who you love and trust, and they're telling you this about somebody who they're with. Yeah, I really understand. I myself have definitely had situations where, especially if I'm dating women, where I would not date their partner because of their male partner. So, I date women who also date men, etc. So, like, I definitely have situations like that where I know too much about your partner. I wouldn't date them. I wouldn't even go out with them. So, we can definitely influence as a hinge, you can definitely influence the relationship between your partners unknowingly.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do, again, with our monogamous conditioning around like protectiveness, as well as competitiveness, scarcity mindset, all these different things, possessiveness, all these things that are within us. And I know all of us are on like our own personal journeys in terms of how well we navigate that, navigate those, inherent, indoctrinated, mononormative, beliefs and ideals that's within us. So this is one of the things that, makes that whole dynamic very complex.
Yeah, and it's like why we're just giving so many reasons why being hinged is hard.
Yeah, yeah.
It is definitely complex. It's not easy. I think you're always trying to keep balance and like navigate so many different things, like Sundiata was talking about, all the different things that were going through his mind. And even when you're not with both of the partners at the same time, you can still feel that pressure to keep the peace, to not rock the boat, to make sure everybody feels equal. And it's like, the thing I always say though is you really have to just do whatever you want, because you don't know what's going to trigger somebody.
Right.
You can do something that you thought was completely innocent, meant nothing, and the other person is like, triggered right to my heart. So you just don't know what's going to trigger somebody and what's not. And it could be the thing that you thought was going to trigger them didn't bother them at all.
Yeah.
So it's like you should just do what it is that you want to do. And then if some type of conflict arises from that, just talk through it. Make sure you're bringing it up. If your partner comes to you and talks about their jealousy of, your other partner, what do you do? As the hinge, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, I don't have a right answer for you on that. I don't know what you're supposed to do in those situations. And it's like, you're going to have to just be you. You're going to have to navigate through it as wisely and prudently as you can.
Yeah. And also what's coming up for me in this conversation is realizing that oftentimes, it's important for us to also recognize what's our work and not put that on our partner. Just because I'm feeling jealous or I'm feeling like, she's spending more time or being more affectionate or doing XYZ with him that she doesn't do with me. Like all these different things that can fall into that bucket of jealousy, comparison energy, competitive energy, scarcity mindset, all those things, possessiveness, all those things that bubble up and cause triggers because of those things. Really what that's an indicator of is work that I need to do. And I'm not bad at those things, generally speaking. I'm just giving an example because I feel like I've been, on the other side of those things being triggered in my meta and them putting pressure on our love in common, and our love in common feeling like they got to solve it. In reality, that's the person's work. And even when I have had issues with those things, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I'm at a stage in my journey. I'm not saying I've always been here, but I feel like I'm at a stage in my journey now where I still may want to talk about it while also realizing it's my work. So I wanted to say that it takes a lot as a hinge. Sometimes having the awareness to say, I'm listening, I hear you, and I understand, and that's it. And not feeling like you got to solve it. Because I know as the hinge, there's been times where I felt like I had to solve things and I made them worse. Because I would hear what my love said, and then I would go back and try to solve and communicate with the other love about whatever was going on. And I shouldn't have done that at all. I should have just really recognized that that's probably some internal work that my love needed to do to navigate and move through those assumptions, those fears, those, triggers, trauma triggers, etc.
And it's so hard when the person you love is coming to you with a problem about somebody else who you love.
Yeah.
Like, that is a hard place to be in, because it's like you want to defend the person who is being talked about, but that's not a good idea either, right? Because you have to hold these relationships separately. So it's like it can be such a complicated thing. Like what you just said about like feeling like you need to fix it, and how that can make things worse.
Yeah.
That happens. I think that happens often. And I think that's where the saying all meta problems are hinge problems comes from.
Yeah.
A lot of people also will say that if you're struggling with like jealousy, it's or envy, that it's like a symptom or it's a sign of something that you need to address in your relationship. And I think Sundiata is saying that a lot of times it could be something that you need to address in your relationship, but it might also be something you need to address in yourself. And I agree with that. A lot of times I find myself talking myself off of like a jealous ledge by asking myself, like, is this what that person wants? By asking myself questions about what I'm feeling. So I very much agree with that. I like when you talk about your higher self and your darker self.
Yeah, my lower self.
So I think that this is a good time for us to go into our segments.
Yes. So we're going to go into a segment that we call, it's breakup stories, which we call, well, that went left. And that's where we share a breakup story with you all that, we've gone through, in this polyamory journey. And, I know nowadays we like to talk about, transitions.
I was just about to say that.
We don't really do the breakup thing. We transition.
But it really be breaking up.
But it's conventionally speaking, it's like breakups. And and that
it's
sounds
like the
fun.
end of something romantic, right? Kind of
That's
the end
what
of
it
something
is.
romantic is kind of what we're talking about. So I'm going to tell y'all a little bit of a story. It's my first experience as a hinge. I was brand new, fresh on the scene. It was my first relationship really with polyamorous people. And I have to give a name in this story because it's just too hard to tell without a name. So we're going to call him John. So I was dating John for a few months. I was dating John for a few weeks, actually, before I met Sundiata, because John and Sundiata were already connected through a common partner. They already shared a partner, and then I hope that makes sense. So they already knew each other, and I met Sundiata through that group, that polycule. And at first, it was all good. Like, it was great. I was the hinge, but it was all long distance because I was still living in Texas at the time. So I didn't really have too much like in-person, balancing to do, but I was definitely gushing about Sundiata to John relatively early. Like I was definitely like, I really like him, I just want you to know that I'm talking to him, etc. And John was all excited. He was like, oh, that's so great. It'll be such a good quad. We can get a house together and all of us can live together and be a kitchen table polycule. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's so great. So I thought, being a hinge was going to be so easy. This was my first, I thought everything was going to be easy. Okay. I thought my meta relationships were going to be easy. I thought being a hinge was going to be easy. Anyway, found out the hard way. Not true. So a few weeks later, I find out that actually John doesn't really like Sundiata. And Sundiata did not even know that John didn't like him. But this all came out because Sundiata and I continued to talk. So as the weeks went on, we continued to talk. And when I came to visit John, I spent a few hours with Sundiata, and that caused a big problem. So that was my first experience having to balance something between two partners. Like I was having to balance time, and I came to Atlanta to visit John for 5 days. I felt like that was a long time. And I spent a few hours with Sundiata, and he was upset. So it was there was a little bit more to it than that, I think, because we had a mix up with like an airport pickup. So Sundiata ended up picking me up from the airport, because John couldn't.
Right.
And there was like a lot of balancing of time, and it didn't feel fair to John. But to me, it felt totally fine, because I was like, I'm here for 5 days. I spent 3 hours here, and it's a problem. So I learned that, again, I just have to do me. And believe it or not, that actually did end my relationship with John.
It started the beginning of what became the end, really.
I would say that was the end, honestly, because after that visit, it was cold. Like everything, he was very cold. I came back a few weeks later to visit Sundiata and wanted to spend time with John, but he said no. He was like, no. And Sundiata was like, yeah, of course, whatever, because we're aligned in that way. And John was like, no. So I think it really was the end. As soon as he saw that things were getting like more deep, things were deepening between us, it was over. And I wouldn't say I wasn't able to balance. I think I did the best I could balancing. And I think I did just fine personally, because I think my time is my time to do what I want with it. And no matter how much in love we are, it's still me. It's still my time. And it was my trip. Like that was it was my money that bought the plane ticket to get here. Like it's me. It's my time. I'm autonomous. So I think we were just misaligned in that way. He had expectations of me and my time that weren't aligned.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what ends up happening, is that we learn about each other and alignments and misalignments just through experiences. It's like, it's trial and error.
And honestly, watching somebody as a hinge that shows alignment and misalignment as well. Like observing somebody's behavior as a hinge or observing someone's behavior as a metamor. These are things that also reveal alignments and misalignments in relationships. And it's part of the reason why we say you got to take your time when it comes to getting enmeshed and getting in deep relationships with people, because it takes a long time and a lot of experiences and a lot of different contexts to really know someone. You know?
And to really know where you align and where you don't. And, if you should be in a romantic relationship or just a platonic, etc. So
where should you land?
Yeah.
But I think we've given y'all a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. I feel like kind of like a heavy episode. I hope y'all were able to follow. I know those of you who have experienced it are following. If you're a newbie or if you're someone who's just learning,
This might have been a little confusing.
Yeah, but it'll be one of those things that'll come back in your mind when you start living it.
Right.
So, but yeah, y'all, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with y'all again really, really soon on the next episode. And until next time, as always, we love y'all. Peace. That's a wrap for this episode of Sunshine and Rainbows. We hope today's conversation sparked some new insights, deep reflections, or just gave you a fresh perspective on love and connection.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop us a comment, send us your questions, or share your own experiences. We might even feature them in a future episode.
And don't forget to subscribe to Sunshine and Rainbows on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform, so you never miss an episode. And if you're vibing with us, please like, comment, share, and leave a review. It helps others find the show and keeps these conversations going.
Want more Sunshine and Rainbows? Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Sunshine Rainbows for daily insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on future episodes. You can get more in-depth and intellectual with us on our Substack, sustainablesolutionsmedia.com. If you like what we're saying over there, consider becoming a paid subscriber to support all our liberation and anti-oppression efforts.
As always, thank you for rocking with us. We so appreciate the love and support. Until next time, we love y'all. Peace.